What if I told you this? The most influential person who ever lived at about the time that the Roman Empire was formed. His initials are JC. He was proclaimed a living god by his followers. He didn't get along very well with the ruling class, and the ruling class thought he had so much power that they had him killed. He founded a new religion. Perhaps the greatest book ever is about him. He died of multiple stab wounds, and there are many more similarities between the two people I'm talking about. I was trying to throw you off saying, is he talking about Jesus or is he talking about Julius Caesar? Everything I just said applies to both of them. And in this video, you might be astonished to find out how many fascinating similarities they both had. All of that coming right up. Today I'm going to be comparing two astonishingly important figures. The first one, of course, being Jesus, and the second one being Julius Caesar. Now, both of these men weren't exactly contemporary, but they lived within a generation of each other. Caesar lived from 100 BC to 44 BC, which meant he died at 55. And Jesus, I know a lot of people think he was born at the year 0 AD, but a lot of people now think he was born about 4 BC and lived to 29 AD. So to be clear, in the Bible, when they talk about Caesar, they're talking about the Emperor Tiberius, because Julius Caesar was obviously the first emperor, not for very long, and then his nephew Augustus became Caesar, and Tiberius was after him. To show just how important both of these men are, I will hold up something and immediately people will recognize what that is. The cross is perhaps the greatest symbol ever created. And when I say greatest, I'm not talking about most powerful or anything, I'm talking about most recognizable. Now, if you see a bust of someone from the olden days, it almost goes without saying that, oh, is that Caesar? You often hear people say that. And if you could, I'll do a close-up here, you can see, pardon my Italian, it says Julio Cesare, I believe is how you pronounce it, in Latin and or Italian. I only know English, so please correct me in the comments. I don't want to do a mispronunciation. And for that matter, Jesus Christos, I believe, is the Greek pronunciation. Quick fact, Christ means Messiah in Greek. There's another thing you can learn. Now, Caesar was obsessed with fame and glory, and Jesus was quite humble and always tried to relate to the lower classes. Now, when I say Caesar was always bombastic and everything, he also tried to relate a lot to the underclasses, and he loved I don't want to call them the great unwashed, but that's historically what they were known as, basically the common folk of Rome. He dressed like them. Like the toga that he wore was quite different from what the traditional beautiful white toga that you'd see Cicero wearing as he's orating so well. Caesar wore one with fringe that stuck out among the rich elite of Rome because it was more what common people wore. He did that on purpose because he was a very astute man who realized getting the mass of people on your side is always a good idea. That rings pretty true in modern politics too, I might add. Now, when I talked about the books, Caesar actually wrote this book. It's The Conquest of Gaul. And he spent 7 years in Gaul. You can think of Gaul as a shorthand for modern-day France. He went there and murdered hundreds of thousands of people. It was actually horrific what he did. Monstrous, in fact. He held someone prisoner named Vercingetorix, who was the leader of the Gauls at the time. Caesar held him prisoner for 7 full years just so he could parade him through the streets of Rome during his triumph, and then he had him killed. So we're talking about a guy who would keep his enemy alive for years just to parade him around as if he's a caged animal and then kill him the next day as if he doesn't matter. That's the kind of psychopath we're dealing with here. Now, just before I go on any further, I'm of course not meaning any disrespect to religion as I hold up a crucifix or anything like that. You could make a case that Jesus is astronomically more important than Caesar if you believe that he's God and all of that. As far as I'm concerned, for this video, I'll just keep it straight to the life he lived and died at 33 years old. Because you could theoretically make a case he's still alive in heaven, but we won't be going down that avenue for this video. Instead, I'm going to use this book as a reference point, the Jefferson Bible, because it takes all of the miracles and the resurrection out of the Bible and only sticks with the, well, I don't exactly want to call them facts, but facts according to the Gospels. The next thing I want to bring up is their impact on the calendar change. Obviously, AD and BC have to do with when Jesus was born. BC means before Christ, and Anno Domini means after Christ. We now in the historical community use the words BCE and CE instead of that to take the religious aspect out. BCE means before Common Era, CE means the Common Era, but the delineation is still when Jesus was born. Now, you might think, how can you top that as an impact on the calendar? I'm not saying Caesar topped it, but he came pretty darn close. The month of July is named after Julius Caesar. July, Julius. For what it's worth, August is named after Augustus Caesar, who was the second emperor of Rome. You might hear of the calendar that Caesar made being very important. It's the Julian calendar, and it's still what we use today. In other words, before Caesar came, there were 10 months in the year. After Caesar came, there was 11, and after his, it wasn't his nephew, his great-nephew Augustus, there were 12. So Caesar added a month to the calendar, but Jesus basically took world history and put it in two, based on when he was born. It sure is hard to top that. Now, when I talk about leader of a religion and a self-proclaimed God, Jesus never really talked much about being a god, and in a total irony, Caesar did. He was just so bombastic. And Caesar wore the laurel crown. If you just close your eyes and think of Caesar, you probably think of him with a receding hairline with branches over here. That actually predates him, and it's from the ancient Greek Olympics, but he is so good at branding, he's basically made it his own. Just like he did with the Caesar haircut, or the salad for that matter. Now, he was actually Pontifex Maximus in his lifetime, which is kind of like being the Pope of the Roman religion. This predates Christianity, and they said, this guy is so ambitious and popular, let's just make him the ancient Roman equivalent of the Pope, even though he wasn't religious. Again, the power of this man. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, just it's astronomical to think just how ambitious this guy was. He was just never satisfied with anything. So basically, Jesus is famous for wearing a crown of thorns. Caesar is famous for wearing a crown of laurel leaves. So besides obvious golden crowns or traditional crowns that a monarch would wear, crowns that aren't made out of metal, those two have the two most famous crowns. So in terms of fashion, they've both made an impact. Their initials are both JC. They were both the leader of a famous religion. Both of them were killed by Roman power elite. Both of them lived within a few decades of each other. Both of them lived around the Mediterranean. Here's another one. For some of you religious people, I don't know if you might find this controversial, but both of them went to Egypt, according to different sources. There are so many more that I can get into. I don't want to be rambling on. Just remember, JC, either one you think is more important, the most important initials in history. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.